Now, I know you guys are expecting an amazing and beautiful presentation with slideshows and pictures. Unfortunately, I forgot that something has a very important rule, and that is if you don't give it to Miss Morgan before Thursday, it doesn't get in. So if you want, I have it, and my week is open. But in all seriousness, this isn't going to be your typical mission report. Because as much as I would love to get up and show you pictures of people you don't know, and frankly, they probably don't even matter to you that much except for the fact that they matter to me. Or to give you statistics and numbers of all the people that I had in contact and stuff like that. You know, to me, it is not what speaking is about, what preaching is about. See, I don't like to give up and tell you guys, oh man, I'm such a hard worker, and try to justify your support and your partnership with me in my mission. Now, what I want to do is I want to impart with you some of the knowledge and wisdom that I slightly achieved while in the field, and indeed throughout my 2 years as an aimer. Now, for those who don't know, AIM is an amazing program that's in Lubbock. It stands for Adventures in Missions. And it is by far the best decision I've made besides being baptized in my whole life. I went to Lubbock and I trained for 8 months, just enough to know that I don't know enough. And then they sent me to Ireland, to Northern Ireland, where the only prerequisite for going was that I had initiative. Now, I'm not sure what initiative is, but what I discovered that it is creativity. And it is the will to go and to do something even if it doesn't work. And so tonight I want to teach you, for lack of a better word, on how to do missions in the 21st century. How to do it and be successful. It's very simple. And it's just to do it. I tried so many things that didn't work. And a lot of times it felt like I was taking a big boulder and I pushed it up a hill only to watch it roll back down. There's a time where I thought, what, kids like fishing. So I took them fishing and that didn't work. I was like, well, they like canoeing, so I tried to get them to go canoeing. And I tried all these things that never really panned out. But every time I look and I saw that boulder fall and it goes back down, I said, you know what? I'm going to get back and I'm going to push it back up. And eventually, it got to this point where I'm like, you know what? Why try? When you go into a church building and the first thing you do is look at the baptistry, it tells you a lot about a church. So when I first arrived at Summit, I remember I went up and I looked at the baptistry and I put my finger in there and I was like, whew, that's warm. And now I go up there and I'm like, whew, that's hot. Because Dan Magnese and Ben Painter take good care of the baptistry. When I first arrived in Coleraine, Northern Ireland, their baptistry was filled with junk, with cobwebs, with trash. And it told me something about the congregation there. That it was a congregation that hadn't seen any fruit for a long time. Now, you think, well, that's really disappointing for, a missionary to go in and see this, but it's even worse for the members there. Because it wasn't because they were lack of trying. It's because they were doing stuff the same way and they thought it would work. A lot of times I always hear the definition of insanity is doing something over and over and expecting a different result. Well, that is what the members in Coleraine were doing. And so we came along and we're like, we're going to change some things. You know what? On Tuesday nights, we're going to have a Bible study just for kids. Or, on Wednesday night, we really can't afford to go to the building anymore for lights and heating. So we're going to meet in our homes. And we tried all these different things. And one of the first things that changed when I got there is that baptistry was cleaned out. We didn't put water because we couldn't afford to put water in it, just because we didn't have any perspectives. And I left Ireland. Not one baptistry, not one baptism in that baptistry. And that was really disappointing. Now, I get a phone call and it says, "Ben, we just had one." Now, of course, I was thinking pizza at the time because I was hungry. Until they said, "No, we just had a baptism. And it is the first one in 15 years that church had. And I guarantee it wasn't anything we did. It was because we tried to do something, and it worked. Now, God always gives the change, but we have to do it. We have to start it, right? So in Coleraine, this is a town of 22,000 people, divided into 6 different areas. And I got 1. Well, I didn't get it, but God got 1. That's good, right? And so, we got this one person. And you start to ask yourself, is that it? And not to demean churches and missionaries all over the world, but there's really one thing we always care about, and that's saving souls. And so if you have your Bibles open, please turn with me to Mark chapter 5. Now, I made a resolution when I went to Ireland that I would only preach from the Gospels. And so far, I've managed to do it every single time except for once. But the reason I did that is because I realized that I do not spend enough time with God. I don't spend enough time with Jesus. And so I wanted to do it until I could make a sermon out of every passage. And so Mark became my favorite gospel. And even to the point where Mark chapter 5 became my favorite chapter. Because it is the story of transformation. And as I believe that is Summit's goal for 2016, is to transform. In Mark chapter 5, right after this huge storm has happened, you see Jesus, he goes onto the beach, and the demon-possessed man comes up to him, and they have this conversation. If you'll read with me, I'm going to start in around verse 5. Night and day among the tombs and the mountains he was always crying out, cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him, and crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you done with me, Jesus, Son of God, the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he said to him, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit." And Jesus goes on and he asks his name. But we see this man, he's not in a very good shape. If you're part of that community, you know him. All right? Every time you try to have a funeral, you hear him. Every time, you want to go visit a loved one's grave, you see him. He was always there. And then later on, Jesus says, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly, "Do not send us out into the country." Now there was a great herd of pigs feeding on that hillside. And they begged him to give his permission to send him into the pigs. What I'm trying to say is Jesus got rid of these demons. He got rid of these demons. This is where I was hung up in Ireland. Because in Ireland, they have all these folk stories. You ever heard of leprechauns? What about superstitions? You ever heard of a 4-leaf clover? These are all Irish. To their core, They are Irish. And I came from this land where I've tried to make everything scientific. I try to make everything logical. And so when I read that Jesus sent these demons out, I always, for some reason, it never clicked to me that they were demons, but instead that these were, his bad habits or something like that. Because in my eyes, the world had lost its enchanted view. I can tell you the atom breakdown of things, and I do all this what I thought was smart sciencey stuff. But what it did is it took away my ability to see that God gets rid of demons. Now there's a correlation to how Jesus sent the pigs into the demons and then swallowed them up in the ocean. It was an army, and it was just like how, Moses had, let God, swallow the Pharaoh's army. And I could go on about that. But the point I'm trying to make, very obscurely, is that in Ireland and in Africa and in Honduras and in Brazil, they look at things differently than we do. When we were in Kenya, in the villages, the witch doctors, the people with voodoo, they're the ones who have a lot to say. Because these people, they look at life differently than we do. In Africa, people don't question if there's a God or not. They know instinctively that there is something out there. And yet, I can honestly say that on the road that we are going now, and in 10 to 15 years, America will look just like Ireland. Grumpy old men arguing between which, for lack of a denomination that is better, for arguing between what they see is right and what they take from the Bible that is wrong. And then you'll have the younger generation that will be bickering and saying, there is no God. I've seen it, and it is the future of America within 10 to 15 years of a generation of people who do not believe. The way we see the world has to change. The way we view people has to change. If you think about when you drive, and you look to your left and you see someone, and you look to your right and you see someone, or better yet, you're at a grocery store and you look to your left and you look to your right, what do you see? You see two people you probably don't know their names. Now, I like to escalate everything that I talk about. When I am in debates, I automatically escalate it to the point of World War II. All right? And when I talk about Jesus, I automatically escalate it to the cross. Because I want my words to have the most impact possible. And so when you look to your left and you look to your right and you just see people, when Jesus was on the cross and he looked to his left and he looked to his right, he just saw two people. But even then, he tried to bring them home. To give you an illustration about the transformation that has to happen into your life, God supplies it. To give you a visual, think about everyone in the world. 7 billion people. Now, if you could die, and all of them would go to heaven because of your sacrifice, would you do it? And of course, I asked myself these questions, and I said, yes, of course. My life's not that important. And then I asked, what about my soul? Because the price of a soul is priceless. And so my soul, for 7 billion souls, that's a good deal. And I took it down. And I ask you to do the same. At what number do you honestly stop and saying, you know what? That's just not worth my soul. Is it 100 million? If you died and went to hell, but because of some sacrifice, I don't know why, just don't think about it too much. But they went to heaven, and you went to hell. 1 to 100 million, is that worth it? What about 100,000? Is it still worth it? What about 1,000? And honestly, brethren, it is at that number that I started thinking, you know what, I really want to go to heaven. And it's at that point that I realize that there is still something that needs to change. When God tells us, when Jesus tells us to go out into the world making disciples and baptizing them in his name, yeah, he's referring to everywhere in the world, but he's also referring to people right here. And you guys are doing such a good job of it. But as this coming year, the transforming year of Summit, not only will the physical appearance change, but also the interior. You're going to start to see things that are changing. You're going to have dinners who you don't know who's showing up, but someone's going to show up. I just want to say that I am so impressed, and I have gotten so many ideas from Summit on how to proceed into the future. As many of you know, I'm leaving to go to Sunset International Bible Institute to learn to be a preacher, to learn how to use PowerPoint, hopefully. But I could not do it without you guys. Not only your example, but your constant encouragement. I found it really funny today, yesterday. My dad told me, you know, Ben, mission reports are really boring. And he was being funny at the time. It was a longer conversation to that. But he said, Ben, if you want to, continue to be a partner of Summit, you got to give a better sermon than the pulpit preacher. So what he was saying is, Ben, you have to preach better than I do. I was like, but I'm going to Bible school, Dad. That's why. Because I need to continue to be transformed. Because I need to continue to understand why God says, go into the world. Why do we only preach the word of God? There's so many questions that everyone has, so many thought processes that we all have, and it's unique to us. But there's one thing that unites us all, and that's the blood of Christ. Now, I may seem a bit scatterbrained right now because I have amazing news to tell you. Since I left, there have been 3 other baptisms. 3. I didn't see them coming, and I didn't know that they were happening. But there is a imprint. Because every time you try something, you ask your neighbor for a Bible study, you ask him to come to church, you push that boulder up to the hill and it rolls back down, it doesn't go all the way back to the bottom. It stops just a little bit until your efforts pay off. And it was with great happiness and joy that I can tell you that one of my best friends in Ireland, Josh O'Halloran, was baptized last week. And his brother Shane was baptized tonight. Well, night there, it's a bit late there. But that is the impact that you've had. That is the impact that Summit has spread. You have sent me to Ireland to do one thing, and that was to spread the word of God. And I can honestly say that I have. And I did my best, and I thank you. Now, just like in Ireland, there's always a moment in life where you look and say, what's next? What next am I going to be doing? For some of you on your faith journey, you have not said, I need to commit to Christ. You haven't said, God, I believe that Jesus was the Son of God, and you haven't been baptized. And if that need is tonight, or maybe what's next is you have something in your life that shouldn't be there. All the baggage you keep with you, all the stuff you hide, but you need to get rid of it, and you need the prayers of the church to help you. If anything we can help with, please come now. Together we stand and sing.